So we live in a crazy time. I think most of us understand that. And recently, we saw last week a bunch of legacy media and a bunch of trend tubers, YouTubers that are latching on to this idea that the recent space flight of an all civilian female crew was completely false and fabricated by Blue Origin and Jeff Bezos. Now, who am I to comment on this subject? Well, I'm not really a gossip channel. I'm certainly not a conspiracy channel. However, my first 2 years on YouTube, I spent exclusively reporting on space, and in particular, the privatization of space and rocket technology. So I do feel somewhat qualified after spending tens of thousands of hours on this subject. Now, I moved away from reporting on that stuff because I really got frustrated with what I saw as waste, fraud, and abuse coming out of both Elon Musk and Jeffrey Bezos. For example, we were going back to the moon in a program we called Artemis. Now, unfortunately, this became, let's call it what it was, a de-measuring contest between these two billionaires. And they ended up costing the taxpayer 20s of billions of dollars, which was initially 5 billion, ended up inflating to well over $20 billion. And that was very unfortunate because it really turned me off to space in terms of why I fell in love with it. And that was much less about harvesting space and profiting off of space and more about what's out there. What's the next frontier? All of that has now been bastardized as the Billionaire Boys Club are just basically harvesting our taxpayer money. Mr. Doge, I'm looking at you. And all of us who are aware of this know this is happening. And it's very unfortunate. So I decided to just be done with it because it really made me upset. But I couldn't stand by now because what I'm seeing out of legacy media, as well as a lot of trend tubers and YouTubers, is they're trying to pitch this narrative that this flight and the landing was completely false and fabricated. Unfortunately, we live in a world that people just believe what they hear, even though it's right in front of their face, the truth. And if you took 2, 5, 7 minutes like I did and simply just compared these launches and landings to some of their past launchings and landings, you would easily be able to see what they're trying to tell you is abnormal is completely normal. All right, so it always comes down to the tail of the tape, and we are simply doing something that anyone can do, and that's comparing footage. Now, the first footage you're going to see on the screen is going to be the footage that is in question with the all-female crew, to include Katy Perry, Gayle King, and of course, Jeffrey Bezos' fiance, Lauren Sanchez, and a couple other notable ladies that were on board this flight. Now, when we break down this footage, we're going to look at a couple different things. But first and foremost, one of the big things they are saying happens right here. If you notice when this employee of Blue Origin walks up, that door is opening internal. So that's point number one that people have taken with this. They're saying that most aircraft or spacecraft in general are going to have a door that swings the other way. And to be honest with you, that's not correct. A lot of modern spacecraft, in fact, are swinging the other way. So that is a moot point. It doesn't really matter. The other thing they're saying is they can't open from the inside. That is completely incorrect. Whether we're talking about the space shuttle or we're talking about private spacecraft, they have to have a way for those astronauts to get out in emergency. So these air locks work both on the external side with a tool, as we'll see, and on the internal side so that people can get out. So clearly what happened here is she walks up, she's checking on the folks, and then they close the door. And I suspect all that is they do this every time. You see, they don't know where this thing's going to land exactly, so they drive up to it, they set up the camera, and of course, Jeffrey Bezos, I'm sure, especially since his fiance is on board, is going to go in, stick his head in, make sure everything's all right, while everyone else is setting up to do the film, for example. So they open the door from the outside, inside, doesn't really matter at that point. He probably checked on her, they closed it, and then they go to do their shot. If anything, this is not fake, it's just bad editing and a bad choice to put this out. So now you can see here, when he opens this door, he really just kind of slips off of it. Now, if you're familiar with an airlock and you've ever used one, it takes a lot of effort, and we'll see that in some of the other footage. So all this indicates is that someone opened it from the inside. Again, because it swings internal is completely normal. And the fact that someone can open it from the inside is completely normal. And you'll see here, I don't want to use the audio, but he says, and there's captions here, it says, she didn't really close it again. Bingo, folks. That's all you need to see, really, right? So there is no conspiracy. Clearly, he's saying, yeah, I checked on it. The tool slips off. She didn't engage the airlock. He even calls it out. Oops, right? This is not a conspiracy, folks. Now, the other thing, too, when you look at this aircraft, it is an aircraft, spacecraft, you notice there's not much re-entry mark on this. Now, remember, this is only going to the very beginning of space. 100 kilometers up is something we call the Kármán line. And that is where we technically say space starts. They go there, and then the re-entry is not that big of a deal, and it doesn't generate that much heat. So this shouldn't have marks like a space shuttle would that's going to outer orbit, that's going deep into space, that's going to visit the space station. Those aircraft are exposed to a lot more force, a lot more heat, and for a lot longer. This thing is barely going to space, so the re-entry is not really that big of a deal with modern technology. So you're not going to see all of those things. Now, this is, I believe, the first flight, and this is the one with Jeff Bezos on here. Again, notice what you're seeing here. And what you're seeing here is there is no big burn marks, right? Again, just simply comparing footage. No big burn marks. And then eventually we will see here them come out of this capsule. Let me fast forward it just a little bit so we can get to that point. What do you notice right there? What happened? The door swung internal. You also notice, what are they doing? They're opening it from the inside. So all you needed to do is watch any of these pundits, any of these so-called news agencies. All they had to do was watch to see the comparison between this footage and the footage we saw last week. All this is completely normal. This is the first launch. So it goes on and on. Let's go to another launch. Now, this launch, I believe, had, long live, he's still alive, William Shatner. Well, this is his voyage, and you will notice again, just reinforcing this with a comparison to other launches. There is no re-entry marks on this capsule. And again, when they come outside, this footage, you'll notice they closed it correctly this time, because when Jeff walks up here, you'll see the amount of effort it takes for him. Now, he's engaging that airlock, and he's going to put some brawn into it, and then he pulls it open. Clearly, that didn't happen on the first footage that we saw. So it was just a misstep, probably by Lauren, that didn't close it correctly. Nothing more than a simple mistake. And again, we see it opening internal. Nothing wrong there. There's Mr. Shatner himself. So here's another launch. Okay, we're going to see, again, this lady, I believe this time walks up, an employee. She's checking on them. They probably already walked in and checked on them. Or perhaps they didn't on this one, but she's going up, and you'll see how much effort she has to put into this tool to open that airlock. You see, she's struggling, right? So again, just proves that that last thing we saw was just a mishap. So that is, I think, their fourth or fifth launch there. So again, we're going back to Katy Perry's footage here. Let's just quickly watch it one more time, and you will see that, again, all these little, slip-ups that happen. Nothing more, nothing less. This wasn't staged. This is completely normal. And again, with those re-entry marks, 100 kilometers, going to the Kármán line, barely going into space, not going to have the forces of like coming back from the International Space Station, not going to be exposed to re-entry for long at all, pretty much minimal. So no reason to have marks. He clearly slipped up here. That's all this is. Now, this should prove to you to stop listening to people that are just trying to get views and ratings. I think we need to start looking at what is right in front of our face instead of being told what is right in front of our face. Believe in yourself, and please stop contributing to the dumbing down of America, the TikTok generation, the melted. You don't need to be that way. Maintain your own viewpoint and do your own research. A simple comparison, as I just showed you, would easily disprove this, but yet all you see is how this is fake. And you see very few people like me willing to say, man, listen, it's not this great thing. It's not a huge Hollywood story. The truth is pretty boring sometimes. It was just a series of mess ups and gaffes and blunders by the bald space bandit himself, Jeff Bezos. So anyways, I hope you found value in this. I really wish you would like and subscribe. My name's Hill Phantom. I'll see you next time.